But if you want to be totally objective, you got to be totally objective and say, well, is it yes to all three? If it's yes to all three, well, that's a recipe for success.
Very happy to welcome Romie Chaudhari. He's the CEO and Managing Principal for Chiron Investments. Romie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Not a problem at all. I always start trying to figure out how people got in the world of the sports business. You've got a long career in sports investment, but what was your first foray into the world of sports business?
The first deal I actually had an opportunity to be a part of was actually a deal that never came to fruition. I was asked to be part of a group to buy the Atlanta Hawks back in like 2013 or so, and spent a year doing due diligence on the deal. We finished second in the bidding, and ended up not winning the deal. And I thought that was my one opportunity. It's not a world I come from. I was an engineer by trade, and a real estate investor, and very much under the radar. And I never even was in my spectrum of possibility to have a chance to be part of owning a professional sports franchise. And so when the Atlanta Hawks deal didn't happen, when it first happened, I was like so surprised, and I felt so lucky and to be part of a group like that. And then when it didn't happen, I was like, oh, well, at least maybe I made some friends. I remember sending a message to some of the people in the group and saying, hey, you know what, even though this didn't happen, at least I can call you guys my friends. And, at least that's for me is a silver lining out of all of this. And I remember still a couple of the principals of our group coming to me and telling me this, you know what, Romie, you don't realize this yet, but you've got 5 or 6 of these in you. You just don't know it yet. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And within a couple of months after that, I was asked about English football. And what do you know about English football? And at the time I said, I know absolutely nothing. And they said, well, you want to buy a team with us? We don't know either, but we're going to do some homework. And I said, well, if I can understand the economics behind it, then I would be totally open to exploring it. And that was my first real deal. And that was we closed in 2016, but we started the due diligence on it back in 2014. And that was my very first experience into sports team ownership. One is evaluating the deal, but it not happening. And the second one was the one that actually happened.
So that deal you're talking about with Swansea City Football Club, English Premier League. And so again, if that was your first foray into the world of sport, what skill set and what was your previous experience to be able to look at sport as a business, coming up from that lens?
Very good question. And to be honest, the metrics that I use historically for any other type of investment do not work for professional sports, especially for English football. If you don't have what I learned, and so for me, what I learned in that deal was if you're not one of the big 6 teams, meaning Man U, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham, right? If you're not one of those 6, it is high stakes gambling. There's always a risk of relegation. So that was my metric. Do I want to take a gamble on this or not? Because if I use any other analytical method, like I'm a real estate guy, if I start using similar types of metrics and mindset and how much risk I want to take and understanding what those risks are, you would never make the investment in English football. Like at that time, I was like, there's no way I would do it. So I just kind of said, I'm going to step out and do it. I was asked to be a director as well for the club. And at the time, I didn't realize it's a coveted position to have. And that actually was a springboard and opened the door for all the other opportunities I've been offered since then. So that's the silver lining in all of it. But in all honesty, the metrics that I typically use, I did not use for Swansea. And I was to be totally honest, like I was not nearly as well informed as I am today. And so, in terms of what I would be looking for to invest, if I were to do a sports team investment, it's changed. It's been fleshed out a lot more and more clearly defined. There's always still risk more than some other deals that I typically do, but I do enjoy it. I did not get into sports because I enjoy sports. That was not the reason. I do enjoy sports, but I actually did it more for financial reasons and for diversification and things like that. And it has actually served me well.
And I mean, we've seen a lot, an explosion, if you will, of private investment and equity into the world of sports. And some of them, for varying reasons, some of them just want the trophy or the courtside seats and the status that comes with it. But you're obviously looking at it with that business lens, but both having to figure out their business and then trying to figure out, like, because some of the sports teams, even to now, haven't really thought about what are the returns to the investors. They've always, managed and worried about what's on the pitch or what's on the court, and sort of, as long as we keep going to next season, we're fine. How has it been, one, but getting on the inside, but then trying to help them unlearn and saying, well, this is what a proper business, if I use that as a term, would operate, and try to make a profit. How's it been trying to turn that ship around in some of your sports assets?
Well, the partners. So, with Melbourne specifically, I pretty much have been driving the ship myself throughout. And in the other deals we've had partners, but they all shared that same thesis of running things like a proper business. When you start to bring limited partners in or other partners who don't have experience in that, yes, you do contend with some of that, because some people do they're literally, their fortunes in their minds change with each game, right? As it win,
Mm.
lose,
Yep.
don't play well. I tell people, hey, listen, don't let it ruin your day. Like, there's always going to be another game, another day. I mean, look, English football is different. If you get relegated, it's really bad. I lived through that, so I know what it is like. And yes, it can get very emotional, and I get very emotional, and I did in the very beginning. And you've learned, like I've learned now, you don't get too high, you don't get too low. One thing I don't interfere in is like the on court stuff in basketball or soccer or anything else. I really don't. What I try to do is provide all the support possible so that we can get a good product on the court and we can hopefully get a good result. But you just do the best to surround the players and coaching staff with everything that they need. And then you live with the results. You can't get too high or too low. And that's the one thing I encourage to people, even our staff. I love that they care so much, but I tell them, I'm like, look, if we didn't play well, it doesn't mean that our season's over. We're not going to stink the rest of the year. Like, there's going to be ups and downs, and let's just ride it out. And I think that's the one thing I've learned. But I've always been that way, I think, from day one. I tried not to get the results, let the results to get to me.
So you mentioned there another asset in my part of the world, Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, playing in the NBL. How did you come at? How did you come at? I mean, you're in Miami, you're in English football, and now and then basketball in Australia. How did you sort of said? How did that opportunity come to you? Like, is it something you were looking for? Was it something that was outreach happening? Like, how did that opportunity come to you and get on your radar?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting story. I actually was a part owner of the New Zealand Breakers. That I was supporting a friend of
Okay.
mine.
Yep.
So the managing partner at the time was a guy named Matt Walsh, who owned New Zealand.
Hmm.
And he asked me, would I be willing to be a board member and make a small investment in the team? And he said he wanted someone with English football directorship experience. It would be good for a cachet for the club, and he wanted me to provide some input and stuff like that. So I said yes. And I really, I was just trying to support him, at the time. Within a few months, I actually got approached by the NBL, and they said, well, would you be interested in having your own team? And I said no. Originally, I said, no, I'm not interested. It's on the other side of the world. I don't know anything about it. I'm tired of, I got enough stuff going. I closed on, I was in the middle of working through the DC United deal also with my partners. Okay. So that was also happening at the same time. So I said, no, I don't think I want to do this. And I remember Matt came to me and said, are you sure you don't want to do this? Like, you really should take a look at this. And I looked at it and I said, okay, you know what? Yeah, I believe that this league is going to grow. I think it's got a lot of potential. I didn't understand the structure or the revenue sharing and all that at the time. I didn't do that much homework until I got closer to doing the deal. But I remember saying, I was like, you know what? If I can, it has to be Melbourne or Sydney. And I've got to be able to see where my guys are going to play, where they're going to practice, where they're going to get physio. where they're going to eat, where my front office is going to be, right? So all the infrastructure has to be there. And all I have to do is hire people and sign players. If that's a possibility, then I'm interested. And then league said, that's possible. So they said, you tell us where you want to be. And I said, well, they said, if you pick Melbourne, the government is going to back you with the state basketball, which is today now the state basketball center. And I still remember asking, and so that's how it started. And that's what happened is that I ended up doing that deal and even closing that deal. And it was a very interesting story. I don't want to go off topic, but it was very interesting, how that deal was put together. And the days after I closed, the conversations I had with Hawthorne and all this stuff, it was kind of funny because I didn't know anything about Melbourne at the time. But the one thing I do remember saying is culture, culture, culture. And what are we about? We want to connect with the community. That is what we've been focusing on throughout. But that's how the opportunity in Melbourne it came about.
And then, like you sort of said, like you're not living in Melbourne, you're not flying to Melbourne, you're not checking, you're not looking over people's shoulders all the time. How as important is that, getting some of those highs right and setting that culture, when you are a long way away, but to say, hey, here's what we want to work towards, in the NBL, which is a growing league with growing audiences, growing attendance, big numbers that are happening on TV. It's, it's heading in the right direction for what you want to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, yes, it was looking back, like I took a lot of risk. Maybe I didn't realize at the time how much risk I was taking, but I remember, when the league told me, hey, we could do all this stuff for you and there's going to be a state basketball center. And I couldn't get any of that in writing, by the way. None of it was in writing because it was going to be based on who won the elections, right? At that time. So the incumbent was loving sport and they said, well, if the incumbent wins, they're going to back you. If the other side, I said, what happens if the other side wins? They said, well, we'll work on it and we believe we'll be able to get that to happen. So I said, okay, well, can I get it in writing? They said, no. And I said, okay, well, what's the election? What's the race looking like? Is it like dead even? One's ahead? They said it's dead even. And so I was just like, well, all right, you know what? And I also said, hey, revenue sharing agreement isn't ideal for the league, but I said, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and roll the dice. The league's in its infancy. Let's see how it goes. And then, yes, the next move was finding people. And, my eventual CEO had no managerial experience. He was a commentator, but he was very polished and very authentic. And I got along with him great. But he was literally giving me a tour of the stadium when I offered him the job. And it was not to be CEO. It was to be a GM. And then and then from there, we did our hires after that. And some we got right, some we got wrong. But, one thing we focused on was from day one, I said, we made a mistake. I had told him that Tommy, and I've told everyone, I even told the first reporter I spoke to there, that I don't want to make the mistakes that we made in Swansea. And one of the mistakes we made was we did not connect with the community, right? And that was the prime focus. You can ask Tommy, ask anybody. I said, my job is to help facilitate in building something that the city can get behind of and be proud of and enjoy. I'm just a facilitator and I want to help build it, but that's what it's about. And I said, in order to do that, one of the things we have to do is really connect with the community. I have to understand the customs that are there. I have to fit in. It's not anyone fitting in with me. I'm the outsider. I have to fit in. And so that is what I've really focused on literally from day one.
And now that you've got, or, either having assets in different parts of the world, are there some things that are similar? Like, even though there might be differences in how governments operate and how deals happen and compared to, in Australia versus DC United, you mentioned there in the MLS, is there some similarities in what you try to do, or at least across all of your different properties?
Yeah. I mean, look, administratively, it's like any other business. So as you start to aggregate some of these things, you can start doing a lot of shared services. I'm sure a lot of other owners do this sort of thing where they have a shared services model and they outsource a lot of things to one place. helps cut costs and all those things. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything specific that, one league versus.
Is it that community piece? Like you sort of said,
Yes.
it was a learning from Swansea and something from Phoenix. You sort of say, well, DC United, we have to make sure we get
Yes,
the community piece right because
that is correct.
without fans, you're not a sports team.
So we do.
Yeah.
So you are correct. Yeah. So on the community side, that is something we've really focused on. I think the other thing is as an organization, establishing a culture is so important, right? So, I want everybody to be there because they want to be there, not because they're getting a check, right? I really want people to be happy there. At least from a moral compass perspective, I want everyone to share a similar moral compass, right? So how we execute things might be different and all that. But I want us all to morally, A, to be happy to be there, to want to be there because they like being there, and B, to have a similar moral compass. And that's the foundation for building the culture that we have. We really wanted it to feel like a family for everybody. That's what we really tried to do. And I think we try to do that across all the assets. Now, that's the one thing we've learned. It's easier said than done, and it's a whole lot easier to start that from day one rather than having something this, big thing and then trying to fix everything after. Much harder to do. It's much easier to start from day one. And so from day one, that is what we established. And I'm happy we did it that way because I have seen now, and not just in sports, but in other businesses where cultural issues, if they're not addressed early, they become a problem later on. And it is very hard to fix.
And then absolutely. I mean, you sort of spoke about it before about the ups and downs of being part of sport. You get the elation and the craziness of a last second heave that goes in and you are part of the team, but it's also a business. So a lot of metrics in sports are titles. How many trophies have you got? But what are some of the non-winning, non on court or on court on pitch success metrics that you're looking for in your sports assets?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's a business, right? And there, it's all tied to finances and profitability and all that. The one thing we try to do, and listen, if you build your business from the ground up and you focus on community and membership, youth participation, and all of these things, that will then feed into valuations and revenue increases and valuation increases and all those things that come in that we're looking for on our financial statements. It all starts from the ground level and building off of that. Yeah. And then look, at the end of the day, we're trying to grow revenue growth year over year. That's what we're shooting for at all times, but doing so in a fiscally responsible way so that eventually you don't want to have a cost problem at the expense of building revenue. So you want to make sure the costs are always well managed, and then eventually you get to start to see break even and then profitability. So you want to constantly build towards that. That's the mandate. That's where we're trying to go. We see a clear path to getting there. I think all the clubs in the league are striving towards that. But again, from us, it starts from the day one culture establishment that we've built and building that grassroots support. And our team is based, as you all know, it's the heartland of Australian basketball, right? We've got a lot of untapped territory right there. So what we were striving for culturally fits well in the region that we're located in. And so now, given that we've built the foundational pieces of an operating business and they're very firmly established, now we can start turning those stones over. And that's where we're at right now, which is a very interesting time for us.
And that must be an exciting time to, I guess give that momentum to your staff, but say, hey, come back to us with ideas on, how you can commercialize this, how you can better serve those fans, and then how we can bring partners on board. And they sort of have that, I guess, bottom line mentality to say, if I pitch a project, I've got to be able to say what it's going to cost, but also what it's going to bring in. And is that sort of that, like we were sort of talking about earlier, that rewiring of the sports brain that sometimes is just focused on the product on the court?
Yes, that's correct. So we are not hobbyists. This is not a hobby. Yeah, there's the emotional attachment. Yes, there's some, but at the end of the day, this is a business, and I make it crystal clear. that yes, we want to enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride, enjoy the sport, but it is a business at the end of the day.
And then you get to take advantage of whether it's things that the league is doing and that uplift, or like in the case of, MLS, a guy like Messi plays for the other team, and it's like, well, how do we take advantage when he comes
Yes.
to town, because we know our stadium will be packed, and how all the ticket packages all get wrapped around that piece. I was lucky enough to be at DC United for the All-Star game a couple of years ago, and like, bringing in all those fans that might be there for the first time
Yes.
to get them to come back.
Yes, you want to try to get new fans. And always we're trying to get new fans. And that's exactly what we do in Melbourne. And now, again, given that now we've really focused on building a very strong culture. We've accomplished that. Now it's about getting some of that grassroots support locally and getting new fans engaged. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to games when I do go there, and how many people who are not basketball fans made the trek. Either I invited them, or friends of mine invited them, or friends of theirs invited them, and they come and they say, you know what? I've never been to a basketball game before. I had so much fun, and I am coming back. Like, I love hearing that. We've actually had a lot of that. A lot of them end up being like, it's oftentimes it's corporates, it's non-corporates. I play a lot of, I started playing a lot of tennis. So when I go to Melbourne, I play at Tennis Australia. The guys I hit with, hey, some of them never got a chance to go. I'm like, why don't you come, bring your partner with you, whatever you want. And I welcome anybody and everybody to come. And I think we do a very good job of entertaining and fans. And so I love seeing people come and then saying, hey, can I come again? I'd like to come again. I really like that.
So you've had some investments in really, established sports and established teams in football and in basketball, but then you're also looking at what are effectively new sports in pickleball. How do you make an assessment on that? And being an owner of the Miami Pickleball Club, it's obviously exploding from a participation point of view, but there's still what's it going to be from a fan,
Yes.
a fan and a consumer product. How do you sort of tackle that? As like, there's no rule book for pickle.
That is correct, and you hit the nail on the head. It's like, okay, you're having people hit like looks like a wiffle ball, and they're just smacking the ball. Like, is it great for TV, right? Like, because the holy grail is media rights. You get media rights, paid media rights. That's what comes with it. Then is increased valuations and whatnot. And so, look, the one thing I learned in investing in sports is, and why I did the NBL at the time, is you're investing. Like, I thought the league, if the league is professionally run or set up to be run professionally with people who have the mindset of where we're trying to take this, and it's not a hobby, right? There's not that sports fan mentality of running the business, and they're trying to really do it in a proper manner, and it's well thought out. Then I said, you know what? That's a league that I may have interest in. Also, economically, the bet that was made at the time was not a very expensive bet, relatively speaking, to what other sports teams go for. It was very small, minimal. So I was willing to take a chance because the cost basis was very low, and I got to know the league operators and what changes were coming in terms of personnel. So I really, you're also investing in people. It's not just the concept in the sport. You're investing in the structure and the people that are running the structure and putting it together. You're putting stake into that, So I'm looking at that as well. And I said, you know what? I think they're going in a good direction. I said the cost basis at the time for buying the license was very low. We didn't have to put a lot of cash on the balance sheet at the time to carry the club for a while. So I thought it was a risk worth taking, and it's so far been very good. And I've actually made subsequent investments in pickleball, not in professional teams, but in operating businesses in Texas and in Florida.
And is that a bit of that diversification? Because it's not all, it's obviously a sport that has multiple facets, whether they be facilities where people play, people book their courts, all that. Like, you can start seeing that, if this is going to be a sport that has momentum, there is going to be a whole infrastructure, in the same way that tennis does. And is that how you look at it from an investment point of view?
So yeah, when you can leverage other assets that can tie into your your sports team, by all means, you should. I would advise doing that, and I do look for opportunities to try to do that. In pickleball, I actually am a part owner of a very large facility in Fort Lauderdale called the Fort, and and it's a great destination for a pickleball team to call home. Only problem is we signed a deal with the APP, which is a rival league. So I'm a part of the PPA, but we have a deal with the APP for the facility. I tried to make that the home for my pickleball club, but we couldn't do it because of the deal with the APP. But that would be a perfect scenario where even that's the case. All the pros come down there to train and play still. But yeah, anytime you can do it, you try to leverage your assets to get any competitive advantage that you can.
You spoke earlier about, the Atlanta Hawks thing as your sort of first foray and being part of a group. In some of these, you've been the one man in, and others you've sort of been part of a group. What do you look for when you're looking for a partner, on a deal, or being part of a group that's putting in a bid or making an acquisition? What do you look for in your partners?
You know, it varies, but like in a perfect world, I really have three simple questions that I ask, internally. I ask, okay, do I like the person? Do I trust the person? And do they bring value to the relationship? Then I ask, well, do they like me? Do they trust me? And do they think I bring value? Right. And do I honestly feel I bring value, right? So usually the answer is yes to two out of the three questions. But if you want to be totally objective, you got to be totally objective and say, well, is it yes to all three? If it's yes to all three, well, that's a recipe for success in a partnership. It's a very simple test that I do, but I try to be very objective and thoughtful about it and just say, okay, if I can like a person, trust them, and they bring value, in order for me to like and trust them means their moral compass must be similar. Remember, I talked about moral compass earlier. Well, the moral compass is similar to mine then. And if I feel they're adding value, well, now it's smart money that's at the table, right? That's how I look at it. And I want to be that to them as well. So that's the metrics. Those are the metrics that I use in looking for partners. And every partner that I have in my group, pretty much, they're friends too, right? They're my friends as well. And people say don't do business with your friends. I actually have had my best deals happen with friends.
Well, you've got to keep working with them, and like you said, if you don't like them, it doesn't make for a pleasant experience.
That's right, exactly. So I try, and sometimes you might say, well, I like the person as my friend, and so you might be a little more forgiving on other elements of the partnership that matter. So that's where you have to be very objective and say, okay, yes, it's my friend, but it's business also. So there's got to be, a march in the same direction. There has to be certain hurdles that are met. And it's not just about being friends. You have to be able to also add some value. And I only ask that of others if I can deliver that myself. I don't want to be a hypocrite and say, okay, well, I want you to bring all this to the table, even though I don't bring anything to the table. No, I like it to be, we're all kicking together.
Is there anything sort of, looking forward, especially in that sports investment scene in the team and leagues, we're seeing, new leagues, completely new leagues pop up, that are self-contained and people will be part of it. We're seeing different investment vehicles going into sport, whether they be the SPACs or NFL teams talking about, just cutting off a little piece and letting people be a small investor, and even some, talking about going to IPO. What are your thoughts on what the future might hold in the world of sports investment specifically?
Yeah, this category, sports in general, is just on fire. All the private equity firms are setting up all these, like you mentioned earlier, these SPACs and all these different investment vehicles to buy into these franchises. There's no shortage of content out there. I will say there's a demand for it. I hate to go back to that time because it's a very dark time, but COVID was a very strong indicator of how much content like live sports mattered to people, especially during that time. Everybody still wanted, that's one of the reasons why I love this investment and investing in sports in general is it's uncorrelated to any other asset class that's out there, right? The whole market could take a dump. The stock market could suck. The real estate market could suck. Everything could be trashed. People still want to watch games. They still want to watch those games, right? So,
Yeah.
so in COVID was perfect evidence of that. There was nothing else you could do. People were starving for content. And so, that never went away. And so I really feel like there's really still so much, um, room to grow. I mean, look, some leagues are way more mature than others. The NBA has shot through the roof. Team valuations just continue to skyrocket. And there are other leagues that like it's one of the things that I liked about the NBL is it's a very, very good league. And team valuations are a fraction of what they are at the NBA level. We're just scratching the surface of media rights, and I think that, these secondary leagues, there's a lot of room to grow in some of them, right? And so I just think there's a lot more potential in this. And as some of this professional money starts to look beyond the United States and they start looking in other countries and other regions, it also is going to help shape how leagues and teams work together, work with one another, right? So like, for example, we're in Australia, there's an opportunity to now do potentially like a Euro league, but in Asia, like a super league in Asia, where you can start doing things very creatively. Well, you put money behind those sort of things, there's a lot of different things you can start doing. And so there's a lot of potential still. And I'm excited about being part of that space.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Romie. I want to get to the Sports Geek closing five before we wrap up. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Yep. Is the only game. So it was a basketball game. It was the Boston Celtics against the Washington Bullets at the time. It was in 1986. I was 12 years old. My dad
was Celtics, one of the Celtics' best teams.
Yes.
That's Bird, McHale,
Yeah.
and that era. That would have been an absolute treat.
Yeah, it was either 86, 87, it was around then. And I just remember it was the only game I ever went to as a kid. I never went to a game until after that. I went to one game. I never went to a game until I went to graduate school in Los Angeles when I was about 27. That was my first basketball game. But this was my first game before that and the only game. And I still remember the day.
Yep.
My dad took me, drove me to Boston, and my seats were they were in the nosebleeds, the 300 section at the old Boston Garden, and I was behind the big AC units, the HVAC units, so it was an obstructed view, so I could only see like 2/3 of the court. But Larry Bird had 49 points that night and played one of the best games he's ever played. And I just still remember I had binoculars. It was a kid, man, and I just fell in love. I said, man, this is such a treat and so much fun. And to this day, I still remember. I just tell my dad, I said, man, thank you so much for that. I mean, he feels bad. He's like, I wish I could have done more for you, but he's like, it's what we could do. And it was so much fun. So that was my one sporting event, my first one.
That's a terrific memory. To see Larry Bird put up a 40 burger would be a treat. You've obviously been to lots of different sports events now, but do you have a favorite food memory or a go-to food at a sports event?
I'd say, you know what? It's going to sound a little bougie. I went to the best food I've ever had was at the LA Rams in their new stadium. They had like gourmet sushi in there, man.
So
it was great. Yeah, I mean, the typical answer is hot dog and pizza, but I actually like that.
No, that's fine. Yeah. I do say food memory because the food game in the world of sports, it keeps going up. I mean, you can say dodge a dog. It's quite valid, but I think you're the second person in the last couple of episodes that said sushi. So again, it's not my go-to food at a sports event, but if you love your sushi, and that's giving the fans what they want as part of the experience. You want to be able to go to a game and have sushi and take in a game.
Right.
So completely understand. Managing or being an owner of teams in different parts of the world, you're in Miami. What's the app you open first thing in the morning?
Well, look, after I'd say my WhatsApp, I have my routine. It's my emails, text messages, WhatsApp. And the app that I use, I really don't do much social media or anything like that, but I've become a little bit active on Twitter. And so that's
That's terrific. Is there someone, I always ask people if there's an author or someone they follow, might be on Twitter, that you think that the listeners should give a follow, and why?
I really like listening to Simon Sinek. I listen to him a lot. He really just gives perspectives. It's like there's always a brightness of view for looking at things and perspectives, and it's just very enlightening and very refreshing, especially given that the world we live in today I really enjoy the guests that he brings on there, and just some of the things that they talk about and the things that they say matter to them or things that matter to me. So that's one person that I listen to.
I mean, his big successes start with why. Is it something you've worked on? Do you know what your why is?
Oh, that's a deep question.
It is.
That why has changed over time because now I have a family. Like I have a family now, right? I have a child.
Yep.
Everything's changed
Yep.
now because I have a child. But that's a deep question. I look. We have one life, only one. There's no dress rehearsal for life. So one thing my why is I just want to say, listen, I want to make the most of whatever years I have here. I want to be happy. I want to be healthy. I don't want to hurt anybody. I want to help others, and I want it to be a good example. My why now is why am I here is to teach my child how to survive in this world and how to enjoy the ride and how to be good to others, and maybe be better than me at doing that and fine, and just teach her what I can. And I feel that's why I'm here now. I think it's to share everything, whatever I've been able to build, to share it with her and my family and friends it's about enjoying the journey while you get to wherever it is you go in life. I just want to enjoy the ride the whole way.
Absolutely, absolutely, and a terrific answer for one that I just threw you on the spot there. Last one, and you might have teased it a little bit, but what social media platform is your MVP? What's the one that is your go-to?
Yeah, I really only use LinkedIn every now and then, not actively, but a lot of people reach out to me on LinkedIn. But for better or worse, I've started using Twitter a little bit, and
yep. As long as you recognise the for better and worse, that's the main thing.
Yeah,
I think. I mean, because it can be a platform for good, but you can take a wrong turn sometimes, and can get you into trouble. And I know it's got me into trouble occasionally, but it's also brought me some great friends and connects and things like that. And it's not exactly what it was once, but to each their own.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That Twitter probably isn't what it used to be, and you have to be careful. There's only so many characters you can put on there, so it's like you gotta be careful how you word things and things like that. But I do think it's been a good platform, depending on what your purpose is. For mine, it's really just to talk about things with the basketball. I don't really talk about anything else other than our team and the club and some of the things happening in basketball. And if I think it's going to be even if I've got some snarky stuff that I say, there's always intent behind it, and it's not malicious towards anybody or any particular person. I'm stating, oftentimes I say I'll state things that other people all think, but they just won't say. And so I'll do that sometimes.
Terrific. Well, Romie, I really do appreciate you coming on the podcast. I'll put links to your LinkedIn. Is that the best way for people to, normally say to people who listen to reach out to say thank you? Is LinkedIn probably the best platform to people to tell you that they've listened to the podcast?
Yeah, that would be great. Sure. LinkedIn is great. Yeah. LinkedIn or Twitter or either one.
Well, thank you very much. Let me know when you're next in Melbourne. I'm only a short walk down from where.
I love the backdrop.
Thank you very much.
Very cool.
That's
I got to get you a jersey.
Thank you very much.
I need to get you a Melbourne Phoenix jersey. We got to get you one.
Well, there you go. The ruse works. That's exactly what the ruse. That's why the wall is there to get a jersey. I'd happily accept one, and let me know when you're next in Melbourne. I'll take you to my favourite pub that's not far from where the Phoenix games are.
Perfect. Have you been to a game?
I have been to a game. I've been to a few games. It's like you said, it's a great spectacle. Put on a great show, and the NBL is going from strength to strength, and Phoenix should be part of that. Currently sitting top 2 in the ladder at the moment.
Yep, top 2. I know we had a tough loss. Melbourne United has our number. They've had our number, and I think they're like 21-9 against us. So we got to figure that one out.
All right, thanks, Romie. Appreciate you coming on.
All right, thank you so much.